I love you guys.
Dance off, bro. I have the high ground.
Expecto Patronum!
39 days, 20 people, 1 survivor. Tribe of Nerds.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tribe of Nerds, our 5th episode of our X-Men series with Kevin, Will, and our favorite pre-merger, Cameron, is back. So, unfortunately, the pirate is not, so...
Yar.
But that's it for this week. So, let's get into it. So we're covering X-Men Days of Future Past. This movie, the critics gave it a 90% and the audience gave it a 91%. So both were very high on this movie. The box
As they
office,
should be.
it grossed 746 million, which is the most by a very large margin.
I was gonna say that's the most. I think Deadpool, one of the Deadpools was more than that. And Logan was more than that.
I believe the first Deadpool at least was almost a billion.
Yeah, Deadpool 1, did beat that. And same with Logan. I know that for sure.
And Logan. Before we get into impressions and everything, I did want to say our tie from last week did get broken. First Class is now number 1 over X2, so just wanted to put that out there at the beginning of the podcast. So when we get to the rankings, we'll go over it, but Kevin and I lost that battle.
Listen, it's not a bad movie, so I'm not upset about it.
Yeah, I'm not either. It's
I love democracy.
Sorry, Jake and Kevin lost that fight to Will and Sarah.
It's me. I carried so much of that weight. My bag.
I mean, basically to Will, and then Sarah was also here, so she just disagreed just to disagree.
She just wanted Kevin to lose so badly.
She did actually. In her defense, she did actually watch First Class, and she liked it, and she did talk about it. So
yeah,
true.
It is a good movie.
I still told Sarah to hop in the backpack, and I was just like strapped up, and I was like, "We're gonna get through this."
All right, so let's get into our impressions of X-Men: Days of Future Past. Though, what did you guys think of Days of Future Past? Kevin,
it's my favorite. It's my favorite. I love it so much. I love it so much. So something that I can that will never be taken away from this movie for me is that I went to this movie. This is one of the first ones that I went to on Thursday night on opening night, and that end scene, when Wolverine wakes up and he's in the new timeline, people gasped, people cheered. When you see Beast, they gasped. You heard people when they walked past the room and they saw Colossus with Katie, which we the comic book people all know, that's a classic couple. People were you could hear them and then when Jean turns around, they cheered, and then when Scott popped up, cheered again. Such a irreplaceable experience as a huge X-Men fan that this is always gonna be my favorite. On top of all the cool stuff, Blink's power, we had Nightcrawler and Azazel, right? We've had teleporters, and we had, if you watched Origins Wolverine, we had Wraith, right? So we've had teleporters, and her throwing the crystals and they make the portal, and the way the way she used it, and then the way the Sentinels figured out, so cool to watch. We get Iceman on the ice slide, amazing. I love it. Yeah. I own the road cut on DVD. I love it.
Yeah, I love the opening scene. I will say that. So, I'm sure that'll be our first major talking point here. But, Will, your impressions of Days of Future Past?
I remember seeing it in theater, and I left the theater, and I was really hyped up, because I think the big hype up for me was we seen the clash of the old guard and the new guard, and that was really cool to see that interaction. Because I know up to that point, a lot of people were doing comparisons of who's the better, Xavier or Magneto and stuff like that. But seeing them not really on screen together, because you never got except for Charles, but you never got which I will get into a little bit about one of my minor gripes, or not one of the gripes. It was more of a wish list thing, but
Mhm, mhm.
seeing them like in the same movie and being able to just see how they like, were able to like be presented at the same time. And like it was a really cool experience to see out of theater. I'm not gonna lie, the more I rewatched it, because I've seen it multiple times, but like especially after this rewatch, my hype for it went down a bit. But that was also just because in some regrettable ways I became a little bit more picky with like certain comic book movies or like certain expectations of things.
Mhm.
And it's like it's still a good movie, don't get me wrong. Like, but there's more noticeable like things I didn't like about the movie than I did the first time. Because like the first time around, I was all hyped about it, seeing all the star power that they had on screen. And it was a really engaging story, so I enjoyed a lot of it. But it's still overall, I still think a pretty solid X-Men movie.
Yeah, yep, for sure. Cameron, your thoughts on Days of Future Past?
I don't want to echo what Kevin said, but this is a great film. I had a great time, and I saw it with this guy he's like a 4-year-old father figure to me at the time, but he had read the comics growing up, so he was super hyped to see it. And I think, the Sentinels aren't of the design of the Sentinels in the comics, but for a modern take on the Sentinels to have just like this fully blacked out, absorbing kind of creature and just endless amounts of them, and the opening scene where it's just fan service, you know what I mean? At the time, that was unbelievable. And like the CGI, you almost forget that you're watching something that isn't real. Like it immediately transports you into that mindset. You get taken away right away. Like you almost forget you're in a movie theater and there's people around you because you're locked in. And like seeing Blink was so badass. I love Blink so much, and they did her so well in that. And yeah, it was great. And then they all die, and then you're like, what the heck is going on? And then with Bishop sending them back. Anyways, I love the film. It's a great story for me personally because I just like that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we'll get into the opening scene in a sec, but yeah, that was good. I enjoyed like some parts of the plot as well. Like it was fun to get Mystique as a central plot point in this movie. Like this is, in my opinion, Jennifer Lawrence's best movie as Mystique. Like by far, she gets to
Yeah.
do so much cool stuff, and it might be Mystique as a character might have her best like time in this movie so far,
Yes.
or
Yes.
in general. So I really enjoyed her in this movie. There again more cool stuff from Magneto. We get introduced to Evan Peters as Quicksilver, which I'm sure we'll get to, and so a great scene with time in the bottle, and then just like yeah, that entire ending scene with Magneto like lifting the football stadium to block in the White House and like trying to assassinate Nixon and then Mystique obviously is trying to assassinate Trask, so you get Peter Dinklage in
Yes.
there.
And can we take a moment to appreciate that they are once again at the White House?
Yes. Yeah.
Once again,
The X-Men, they love Alkali Lake. They love the White House.
Yeah.
mhm.
Well, and just to also tie in the fact, like they even tied in like the magic bullet theory for JFK, and like basically that Magneto is accused of being the reason like the bullet bounced around so many times.
Yes.
He's accused as the reason for killing JFK, and it was just that was really cool to tie that in, and then tie in Nixon and like a lot of like these movies, like fictional movies, superhero movies, they don't use actual presidents. They use like fake made up presidents, and for them to use two actual presidents in like first class with Kennedy and then reference JFK again and then have Nixon here is just really cool. So I enjoyed some aspects of this movie. I feel like the time travel, I mean, I even in Endgame, like the time travel isn't necessarily always perfect. I think there's some things that just don't make sense by the end of the movie. Like Stryker and Mystique, like that was just very weird and just like didn't need to happen. Um, and just like I don't know, it's hard. Just so much stuff is going on. And some characters get like no lines. Like Halle Berry, I don't even think says anything in the movie. She has a great action sequence, but
So a thing about Halle Berry is she signed on They start making the movie. Then they find out she's pregnant. So that's a reason why her role specifically, but the entire like future timeline, there's less of it than they originally planned when they were like storyboarding because she couldn't do it.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. I did want to say there's like a bonus scene of her kissing Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and then just like her being really excited that she just kissed Hugh Jackman.
I mean, who wouldn't be excited to kiss the hero?
I mean, same storm, same.
So yeah, but let's get into the the opening.
The meat and the potatoes, if you would. The meat and the potatoes.
Yeah, so we're just gonna touch on like the major scenes. We'll touch on pros and cons as we go, but we just want to make sure this isn't like 2 hours all the time. But this opening scene, as we've already talked about, like this is an incredible scene. We get so many characters, so many different powers, and just like again, like Kevin said, the Iceman slide is probably my favorite part of it. Like to get his powers at least realized, like it's really cool.
So there's a couple like other things about you that I love, like the natural diversification of the world too, because you have Blink, who's an Asian character, you have Warpath, who is a Native American.
Yeah.
You have, Russian Colossus. You have
Russian.
Well, we're gonna get him as more Russian in Deadpool.
We get Brazilian Sunspot. We get Bishop, who is, I'm not gonna say African American because we don't know that he's American, but yeah, we get a diverse cast.
Yes.
Like in the future cast. So I appreciate that. I also like, there's also like little things to it that I like. Like, first of all, I like that you get to see that the Sentinels talk to each other. So they absorb you see Sunspot's fighting one, Iceman's fighting one. The one who's fighting Iceman learns that power from him. The one who's fighting Sunspot learns that power from him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they use those powers against each other. And they take both of those mutants out. So like that's like a cool thing to let you know, like, oh shit, these are serious Sentinels. These are not just like the robots that beat you up. Like, we're in trouble. And I love the subtle idea of like, how many times has Kitty watched all of her friends die?
Yeah.
Like,
or at least known that they died. Like, it's like, right. This is every time.
Right. Like, how many times has she gone through that? How many times has Bishop done that? So I love it. And that's on top of think about that first movie, X-Men 1, and like the realization of powers. It's like barely there to now. It's so good.
Yeah. It definitely is. Will, your turn.
I got like I'll stick with just the pros for this part. But there are like some things in this first scene that like on rewatching, like I said, this is where I hate that I gotten like somewhat nitpicky in some ways, but like at the same time, part of it is also just I have like wish lists on certain things. But what I did enjoy and what I did like was I like actually how the Sentinels compared to the comics actually feel more threatening in this way. I think this is because to me, as we know, like especially like if you know like the Sentinels in comics and other like forms of media, there's different levels to the Sentinel, and like ultimately like different threat levels with them. And you have like your regular grunt level Sentinels, that are a threat to your like lower tier basic mutant. But for like the X-Men, like we've seen countless times throughout history, they dice them up.
Right.
Continue. Hell in the Danger Room, like they train against them. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of them are fine, but these Sentinels felt definitely much of a threat, which made me like in turn, it's like, if there's like a master mold, like what's that Sentinel level like? Like, because if these are adapting, what the hell is like their master program like looking like these higher tier Sentinels? So they did a really good job. I love, like I think Cam, you brought up like the design of them were really cool, and I like the detail of like we later know why, like because like Mystique's DNA was infused with it, but I like the details of just the adaptation of it. But like for pros, like like seeing the wide range of different mutant powers, I like Bishop. I was very excited, like when the trailer was dropped and they were showing Bishop was involved. Like I was very excited to see him. Part of my gripes, I'll
execution.
But I'll get to that with some of my cons, like specifically. But like, there was still a lot to like about this opening scene. It definitely set a really good pace, and it did a great job at showing you the stakes of it all, of like what the X-Men have been through or what's left of them.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, I mean, just like because we haven't seen a lot of these characters before, so them to even bring in more of them is just really cool to see different characters, versions.
Yeah, and it's cool for like characters too, like that we've seen like before, like Iceman. Like Iceman's been like a side character we've seen throughout the series, but seeing him now with like, but like you could tell though he's been through a lot to where just the skills of his powers, like with the sliding and everything, him just naturally going into his ice form, stuff like that. We see Kitty with, you're introduced to a whole new deal, so like at first you're just like, you're kind of sitting there and you're like, what the hell's she doing, you know?
Yeah.
So it gets your attention. It's nice seeing Iceman. I wish, you know, like, again, you know, I'll save a little bit for the complaints, but like you see Colossus Hill being the muscle of the group, you know, holding his own. And then like Kevin said, you got Blink now, you got what's his name? You Sunspot, and then you have the other one. Warpath. Like you see some new mutants to be introducing, and I think they do overall a pretty good job showing off like their powers and like showing the growth of like there's more to the mutant kind than the X-Men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Totally agree. Cameron, any more thoughts on the opening scene?
I guess I kind of went into it in my like first impressions of the film, but I think of all the X-Men films, it's the strongest opening. It grips you like instantly. Like Logan is also good because it's vulgar right away, right? Like you know what you're in for. You know it's like a rated M movie. Everyone always, so it's like that was exciting too. But this was like you're seeing your favorite characters fight Sentinels and lose the fight and then get transported back in time. And it was it was the end game of the time for X-Men. You know, at the time, I didn't think we were going to get something like that with like the linear story they were going with. And because of this, it opened up so many doors for them. Although it wasn't always great, you know, it was very confusing, but I didn't really care because that's kind of what the comic books were like anyway. So why am I going to complain about a cinematic universe that is also broad?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like, it's really something special to get this for like Fox's universe, to get an Endgame type of thing. So really liked it. Now like let's get into another big talking point. I think we need to talk more about like James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender again, like going back into the past. And we have Nicholas Hoult here as well, which I'm not the biggest fan of his Beast at all, but like, you know, having James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender were again fantastic. We get kind of a different Xavier as well, because this is an Xavier who has just, you know, he's become alcoholic. He just doesn't care about anything anymore. And
gave up his powers.
Right, because he wants to walk again, but he can no longer use his powers at all.
Yeah, he's basically an addict.
Yeah. So just like having that kind of you know, character aggression for Xavier in like a way we've never seen him before is really cool to see. And just like even the fact that Logan literally comes in, like says, "Listen here, you little shit." Like it was like really funny. And then you get the callback to First Class where Xavier's like, "I do seem to remember you, and I remember what you told us at the bar that one time, like 10 years ago, and F off." Like,
yeah,
it's so good. But yeah, and I did want to like touch on also that I really liked the plane scene and like how these two characters, how Eric and Charles, like you're really understanding what both of them are saying and like the sides they're coming from, and you're not really like arguing with that either side is wrong. They're both right in their different ways. So thoughts for you guys on this dynamic between the two of them again?
It's they're both good actors, and it's such a good role. And like, I mean, he basically becomes a drug addict because he's like physically drowning out the voices, right?
Yes.
Like it's not even like a mental health thing. It's like literally he turns his power off because he can't take hearing all the voices. So like it's just It's extremely well done, and the two of them are just they're such good actors. And then like they just they both make sense, right? Like they both I was reading a thing this week about like how Xavier's really the bad guy because Xavier's just a privileged kid who like doesn't understand what life is really like, and like it's not that that's not true. That is true, and he is, and like you see that he was like super privileged, and he had this like idealistic idea of how things could be fixed and get better, and like it's easy for him. He has easy access to this drug to turn off his powers and drown out the voices, and like also has access to the healthcare to so that he can maintain that addiction, right? Like you get to see all of that, but it still makes sense. He's not a villain. So like, it's so well done.
Yeah, I think like one of the biggest things with it is like you see the old guard and the new guard sharing screen time essentially in some scenes, like when Charles is talking with his younger self. That alone was like a very powerful moment in the movie, and like that was huge. And like just the acting the acting they do alone is just so impressive. And once again, it just feels, if there's one thing that this whole X-Men series does as a whole, like very well, is nailing Charles Xavier and Magneto's dynamic. Whether they're old or they're young, they do a fantastic job at writing them, giving them lines, giving them and the actors do a great job too, because they're acting even without saying anything. You can just see the pain in Charles' eyes, just like everything, every time he's on screen for a long time. The plane scene to me was really great because I think that was a great example of tough love and a reality check that Charles needed.
Yes.
But also at the same time too, probably like for one of the first times in a while, we see Magneto being very open and emotional, like since probably his mom, like since talking about his mother, like you see Magneto is genuinely like upset, and it's hard not to agree with him because like when things hit the fan, like he's not wrong. Charles shut out the world, and it was only Magneto there
Charles shut out the world, and Magneto's literally like watching the people die. So he's literally turning his power off so he doesn't have to see it, doesn't have to hear it. And Magneto doesn't.
Magneto's watching it. And also, like, I know we kind of like talked about it, but again, and what this movie as a whole does really good is really, they've always been really good at this. Like, and I'll give credit, like bringing up JFK, like, with the magic bullet. And it's kind of cool, little fun, like, detail is like, you hear Magneto saying, like, he's one of us. Like, he's on our side and stuff like that. And it's actually kind of cool because, like, in the real life parallel too, JFK was not very liked because at the time he was for getting rid of Jim Crow laws. He was for equal rights and stuff like that. And it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. So it's like the way that it makes it like, it's one of those like little nerdy history facts where it's like, if you look into it, you're like, yeah, if mutants are around, JFK definitely seems to be would definitely be the type of person to be trying to help them out. And so I like those details, the world building. I just phenomenal acting across the board. Honestly, it was nice seeing. This was the type of Logan and Wolverine that I've been wanting to see more because he was grumpy, but he was that older mentor, and it was nice seeing him like take on that role of being there for Charles, knowing how to talk to him. I like the one thing I loved is like when they first interact, like right off rip, like there's like that bitterness, like where it's like he doesn't believe him. It's not that he doesn't believe him. Charles doesn't want to believe him. Because like right away is like Logan's like firing off this facts. Like you see Charles is like, oh shit, this motherfucker's telling the truth to some degree, or like he is probably right. I don't want to believe it, and that's where the resentment is. So that's the good storytelling there. But and they do a good job with that. But this was the type of Logan I wanted to see, the more leader, mentor, and stuff like that. How like even at the end of the movie with Anchor, it's like, hey, you got a class to teach. You're teaching history. I kind of like that. Like to me, I'm like, hey, if there's anybody I would want teaching history, it's probably Logan. Yeah, and like. I think they just nailed it. That is like a lot of pros for this movie. Is just how just the writing alone in some scenes.
Yeah, I also think that's a callback because I think X2, Bobby's parents ask him what he does, and he says he teaches history.
I thought he said art. I think he says art.
Oh,
I think he said art. Yeah,
my bad.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's fine.
He teaches.
I thought that was going to be a callback as well, but it totally makes sense for Logan to teach history because he's been around for 200 years.
And
Give
how
or
much
take.
of it he remembers, though.
Yeah.
On any given day.
Yeah.
uh,
That's all. That's inconsistent too, and like how much, like if you think about, like a real side note, like he lost his memory like in early modern times, so that's a good chunk of history he don't fucking know or like remember like living. So
Right.
he learned it through a book, maybe, maybe.
But he was there. Kind of. He has a muscle memory.
Yeah.
Pirate Sarah
Remember
for
killing
what is that?
these.
Pirate Sarah for 500. Any thoughts?
I think James McAvoy plays this role with so much grace. You know, it's you don't get a character like Charles Xavier very often, and seeing him played by the oh my god, who's the first actor who plays him?
Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, but like you always see him, he's always sure about everything because he's reading everybody's minds. He's so calm and proper and educated and pinpoint, and then you have this one who's just a mess because he's just trying to drown it all out, and he's not that person yet. He hasn't come to terms with that. It's just so cool to see that switch after all these movies and growing with that character and the dynamics between him and Magneto. Everything echoed from you guys. You guys talk about it better than like how am I gonna up that? Like you basically completely no, you nailed it though, because it's fantastic. And I feel like we're not spoiled like that anymore. You know, when I walk into a movie, I don't feel like these X-Men movies made me feel. You know, I almost kind of wish that we had these
The
separate
next one
universes
doesn't
again.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well, yeah, and I like the fact like that Charles and the two Charles talking, like Xavier's talking, like where the fact like you get the iconic line of Patrick Stewart's Xavier being like, everyone in their lifetime, we won't abandon someone just because they fall and lose their way at one point in their life. We will sometimes everyone just needs help. Like that struck a chord with me, like that made me feel a certain type of way because that's how I feel in my life sometimes. And just like so that really spoke to me.
I think I like what it too is like once again you see even in his other stuff Charles again just taking on a mentor role even to himself, and like I like the whole just straightforward message of when he was like, we just need you to hope again. Like he's not asking for be better like right now. I'm not asking you to turn this shit around like right now. All I'm asking is just have hope, because that's what Charles, like in the movies, his biggest strength was. He just had hope. He always had faith in humanity. He had faith in the good of mutants. That like even despite a lot of the dark times, he hoped that there would be a better world, and that's what always kept Charles's dream alive, because he inspired that hope in others. And so that's always been Charles's big message, is just having hope in a better world. And so seeing him like ultimately remind himself, like it's like, yeah, Logan was a big part in getting him back there. But when it's all said and done, if you really want to do a deep hidden message, when it's all said and done, the only person like who can ultimately truly restore faith in yourself is yourself, because it was Charles's words to himself of reminding him hope. And it's just like, yo, like you gotta like it was just like it was very touching.
Yeah. Anything else to say on Xavier and Magneto, or are we ready to move on to Mystique?
we should move on to Mystique.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, she is a central plot point. As I said in my impressions, I really think this is not only Jennifer Lawrence's best performance, I think this is Mystique as a character. This is her best movie. I love the action sequences, like the fact like you get transformations in the middle of action where she's like twisting around and like, at like subduing somebody in the middle of a transformation. I love that. I think like I just think Jennifer Lawrence's performance all around is so good here. And just like
I assume that she kind of demanded a juicy role because she's Jennifer Lawrence.
Yes.
But they gave it to her, and it's worth it.
Yeah,
worth it. And it also makes sense.
Kitty.
It makes sense for her to be the person, because she's very much pulled. Like this version of Mystique is very much pulled in both directions.
Yes.
So like the timeline that we were on, she was clearly with Magneto when we first met them in X-Men 1, right? Like she's clearly on that path, so it makes sense that along that path, like, she killed this person, right?
Yeah.
So like that makes sense, and it makes sense that like if someone's going to stop that, if that's the game changing moment, and someone's going to stop her, it's going to be Charles, right? Like it all works.
Yeah, I think this was the best use for a Mystique in terms of how you want to make her a center point in a story. I think they do. I think they lose it in future films. A lot of that got to do with like commitment of Jennifer Lawrence, but like I think also it just fits more right to having Mystique being the center point of it all, because like Kevin was saying, she is such a she's such like a just in the middle like figure between two ideologies, raised by Charles but taught by Eric, and it's just like you see her getting torn, and I love the way they use her. Like that is something like Mystique would do, being calculated, going undercover, like impersonating people, getting into places no other person could, kicking ass on like a one-on-one level, like doing like these badass things. And they really did good. Jennifer Lawrence, I think, did really well. And I think a lot of it had to do with I think what Jennifer Lawrence does really well is a lot of physical acting. I think sometimes she does like she does get like, for lack of a better word, lazy with some of her line delivery. And I think it's just kind of how she is. Like you see her in interviews like off camera. She's a very energetic person, which is crazy. But I think when you play Mystique, like I think the directors like had her, because like you have somebody who's gone through a lot. I mean, you can't really bring out a lot of personality and spunk.
Right.
And like
yeah,
this version of Mystique too, like she goes to Trask's office. She sees the autopsy reports. She doesn't just know that, like, she sees Azazel's, she sees Angel's autopsy because we see them. And so like she's also seen the horrors that Magneto has seen. Like so it literally like it just works. It makes sense that like
it doesn't
and like and then that the ending scene is like Charles giving her the choice, and like that's the thing that like it's up to you, like I'm not going to control you, and like that leads her to make the choice to not shoot him and not kill him. Like
I think that, like I said, this is the best they used for like Mystique in terms of a plot device, and that was probably one of the best ways you could do it, because Jennifer Lawrence is really good at physical acting. Like she shows like in this movie in particular, I think she's really good at just showing somebody who's just more blinded by a mission.
Yes.
Like you see that lack of emotion, but I think it's purposeful in this movie.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like she's numb to a lot of things, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
if this was the last X-Men movie, she would be arguably the character who got the most character development over the course of the 5.
Yes.
So well done, J-Law. And Rebecca Romaine.
Yeah, true. Cam, any thoughts on Mystique?
While I preferred the last actress, because Jennifer Lawrence isn't very convincing for me. I feel like Jennifer Lawrence just plays Jennifer Lawrence, and she can't help that. So I don't like seeing her in roles for characters that I really like. Mystique's one of my favorite X-Men characters. But she did bring it in this movie compared to all the other movies that she's in, I'd say. This is her best performance in the franchise. And I loved the effects for Mystique. Like, regardless of it being Jennifer Lawrence, like, the effects of Mystique were nailed this movie. They never put that effort into her ever again. Like, that is so good. And, like, I feel like whoever was in charge of showing off the powers of the X-Men in this movie should have been paid for it, because they killed it.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say about Mystique.
Well, and I mean, we'll see later, because I haven't watched Dark Phoenix, but the fact that the makeup even goes downhill is just...
We're not talking about Dark Phoenix. We're not talking about... We're just not talking about it.
I just wanted to say how much Mystique goes downhill in the X-Men franchise.
Well, I mean, you see it towards, like, even in Apocalypse, too. It's the same.
Oh, yeah. She just was done by that point.
A little bit in this movie, too, in my personal opinion, but, like...
Yeah, she still looks like, like she's still, like, her hair still looks like slicked back. Whereas by the time we get to like a Dark Phoenix, it's just like a red wig. Like,
Yeah.
get it together.
Yeah.
And occasional scales.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just got like scale.
Yeah.
And light blue paint.
The paint is a
Oh
different.
my God.
It's not good. It's fine. We're moving on.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Let's move on from talking about a bad movie. All right, let's talk about the introduction of Evan Peters as Quicksilver, and just like the fact that they give him this introduction as being like this, rebel who like goes around and like steals TVs for his own personal enjoyment just because he can with his powers. And like he's literally playing Pawn, which is funny. Like this is the 70s. He's literally playing like the first video game ever invented.
Yes, because he has the machine.
Yes, he has the machine.
I also like his exhausted mom just being like, ugh, what did he do now?
Right.
Also, the fact that that Wanda does get mentioned because the little sister is told to go up to bother her older sister, so you assume that's Wanda being mentioned, or whatever.
But as we later learn, what the fuck is the timeline?
Yes, yeah. So, but
Fine.
unfortunately, in this universe, he's named Peter, not Pietro. But whatever.
Fine, it's fine.
Whatever. It's a no big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whatever. Man, this was a strong ass introduction because it
was
this was like a cultural like phenomenon in the comic world, like for just how, because speedsters as a whole are always really funky on how you want to like show off their powers.
Yes.
And like this was like a really cool way of showing it, like a moment in time, like
yes,
everything around the world. And then you have the music. Like I think what was underrated about this movie in general is just the music choices they use. Their soundtrack, I think, is pretty fucking good. And like Quicksilver's like moments, is where I think it really just gets catapulted. Where it's like holy shit, the music is key.
And you compare this to the fact when they, this is a year apart from the MCU using their version of Quicksilver and Aaron Taylor Johnson's version. The way they showed their speed powers is completely different, and in this, it's way better than what they do for MCU version.
Well,
and like, I assume that they did. I didn't watch the Arrowverse stuff. I assume that like the CW Flash did similar things, but I can't imagine that it was at all at this level.
No.
Like.
That because like the big thing is like speedsters has always been tricky to like demonstrate how fast because there's different ways you could show off speed, and like the way that they did in the MCU and the way they do it with the CW universe is they just kind of made it just a zipping blur, which is fine because like they're doing it from the perception of how would an average person perceive a speedster. But then like when you go into like the reverse, like the perspective from the speedster itself, that's when like you can like really see like, oh, it's very slow, like how slow you want to do it. Like I think of like a minor detail with the MCU Quicksilver. You see him when I think they do at some point focus in on him running. You still people moving to a degree, but like they're much slower, obviously. But this Quicksilver is like presented to be so much faster.
He's faster than bullets.
Yeah.
He's just walking up to bullets like.
Yeah, like they're moving, like they're showing much slower though than they did like with the MCU. Like they're just very slower amount of movement.
Like I said, I'm sure that in somewhere else, maybe in the Flash movie, they did something like this. I don't know, but like this to me was like a game changer. The only other time that I've seen a speedster power like on screen that was like a new thing that was impressive was Makari in Eternals, which was like the only character in Eternals that was cool. But like
a lot of people like said that like because like between two, and it was nice rewatching this because again, like I said, speedsters are very hard to like put on screen. Like comparing the two, like Quicksilver like is up there with it, but I do think I think hers why am I blanking on the movie?
Makari.
Yeah, Makari.
Yeah.
Her speed feats is just so in the Eternals is just so perfectly done. Like you get the best of both worlds of showing speed. But for this movie, Quicksilver, it was iconic because you got music playing.
Right.
You just got cool little features happening with the ripple effects of people's cheeks. It was fantastically done.
And also the fact that like Star-Lord, he is using a Walkman, so that's where the music comes from. It's like naturally coming from somewhere. And so like that's really, really cool. Yeah, I really enjoy this. Favorite line is after he frees Magneto by vibrating the glass. It's the whiplash.
Whiplash.
On the back of the head.
Yeah.
Like, and it's crazy too. Like, little nerd thing is like with how fast he moves and how he perceives things. If you got to think about it, because obviously we hear the music at a normal space, but it's implying he's listening to it. Think about the speed he has to play it at.
Yes.
Like that thing, that little
Right,
radio.
he has that on fast forward. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's got it like modified to where it's just like we got it on like times like 100 maybe, so he can understand this.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Cam, on Evan Peters' Quicksilver?
I mean, you can't do better than that. They tried with the Marvel Universe, but you didn't even touch the potential that they set up with Evan Peters, because you don't see speedsters. Like, it makes sense to do it in slow-mo so that you can get the details. Makari was also good, but I like to have the variety of versions. And this, for the year it came out and everything, it was the soundtrack, the animation, the acting, like it looks like everyone had fun. It was a fun scene in just after a tense breakout, you know? This movie really keeps you engaged throughout it with endlessly fan base scenes, you know? Like, I feel like you could take any portion of the movie and show it to somebody and they would enjoy watching it, because all of it can cut together to just make it feels like you're reading a comic book. You're flipping, you're like, holy shit, yeah, you know, it feels like that.
Yeah, and I mean, we will get one of the best scenes of Apocalypse is the Sweet Dreams version of it, which is even better than this one. This one's still great, but that one just like takes it like everything up a notch, with him saving everybody from the mansion explosion.
Yeah.
I think also with this scene too is just in general, it's really cool like how it ends though too. Like we get the satisfaction of just everything he's like you put into motion like happens. Yeah. And then you just see the reaction of the other like Magneto, Charles, and like Logan. They're just like they do a really good job at selling like that this thing happened before they could really process.
Yes.
And I think that's also very important to do. And I think what sometimes certain speedsters or like when they do speedster effects, they forget to do sometimes. Because obviously the actors in their mind, they know, okay, he's meant to take care of this shit like really quickly. I think they did a really good job at selling like not knowing what happened. And I think that's how you really seal the deal on showing off a speedster's speed. That like this was all done before they could even really blink necessarily.
And like written like well written that he's a kid and that's why they leave him behind. So like it all like so you don't have to do this speedster scene multiple times, you know, like you can use it, you can have it, and then like you leave him behind because he's a child.
They got him for what they needed. They're like, he's good for this specific task. That's all we're gonna need him for. And then like you said, we don't need him for anything else. And it's perfect. Because if you overdid it, then you take away for how special that scene is in the movie.
Yeah. Oh, and then like we do get the setup that he finds the old business card, and that's gonna set up an apocalypse when he has the business card, and that's where he finds the X Mansion. So so it's cool. All right, so I think the next talking points, I mean, I don't know if we have much to say about Peter Dinklage's Boulevard Trask or not, but I mean, it's Peter Dinklage. It's cool to have him in a movie, in a Marvel movie. I mean, I like that Peter Dinklage just seems like a smart person, so he can pull off being like this evil genius building stuff.
I like to when like he as an actor is playing Mystique, playing Trask.
Yes. Yep.
And so like he goes by the secretary and he's like, "Is that a new scarf? It's nice." Right? Like so like I like him as an actor too, because like showing that he can like play someone who's playing him. You know, like we know that, but like why would this person think that it wasn't him at all? You know, so like he's acting a little weird, but like whatever.
He's a little quirky today.
Yeah.
No, I think it was good. I mean, like you said, I don't think anybody was really walking away thinking he was more of just a target, not like the real true. He's an antagonist by definition, but he wasn't the real thing. The
Right.
big overwhelming antagonist is the timeline. Essentially,
Yes.
is the Sentinels are coming. You have to stop this event. That's what it is. It's the idea and the event itself.
You have
Yes.
to stop
Trying to
Mystique.
other
do the clock.
The other really good thing about his portrayal is how, like, every time he talks about wanting Mystique, he
Mhm.
calls her it,
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
which is like an easy thing to not notice and an easy thing for like an actor who's not paying attention to not pull up. But like he just said, right, like, no, don't hurt it. Like it just rolls off this tongue. So like yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yep. Cam, any thoughts on Peter Dinklage here?
He's Peter Dinklage. He thrives in a smart role.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a standout performance for me in the film. I kind of hate when comic book movies introduce characters that are just kind of like human that I don't care about.
Mhm.
But this one wasn't that. It doesn't make you follow him, but it was still good. He added what he needed to add to the story. He didn't take up too much screen time, so I like what he did with the film.
Yeah.
And I like that we just ignored that there was a different Ball of our Trask in X3.
Yeah, that was a person of color.
Right.
It's a multiverse story. It's fun.
Yeah. It's just funny to look at that. All right. And then like other talking points. I mean, Kevin, you want to talk about the Rogue cut? Because I also did watch the Rogue cut today. Because the version I was using just randomly had that. So I was pretty happy with that. But
You just happen to be watching that version, probably very legally. So in the Rogue cut, so in the theater when we were watching it, right? Like when in the past Wolverine sees Stryker, he like has a panic, and in the future he cuts Kitty, right? So then throughout the rest of the time in the future, she's like in pain, and it's hard for her to maintain her hold on him, being in the past. What happens in the Rogue cut is that after he cuts her, Iceman, Xavier, and Magneto all go back to the X mansion where the scientists, the humans, are experimenting on Rogue. And so that is how the Sentinels are able to adapt to each other's powers, right? So like that's why we see Iceman freezes the one, and then he like absorbs that power and then shares that information with the other Sentinels for them to use. Like that's how, because they have Rogue and they're using her power to work on the Sentinels. So they break into, it makes sense why it's there. Number one, because Xavier is able to like can't get into Cerebro, like they're able to block her from his powers from there. And then it makes sense narratively because he would know how to sneak into there, right? So they sneak into there, they get her out. In getting her out, Iceman dies. He doesn't make it back to the temple. And she comes back, and basically as Kitty is like barely hanging on, she puts her hands onto Kitty's and absorbs Kitty's powers and just maintains that hold on Wolverine. So fun fact, I have never seen it. I know that it's a thing. So the version we saw, they never go there, right? So in the version that we see in the regular cut, as the Sentinels are defeating everybody outside the temple and like they hear it, Iceman goes kind of into the hallway to hold them off at the door, and he just kind of dies on his own there. That's because he was supposed to already be dead. So then if you're watching the like somewhere there's like a mirrored surface, and so in the reflection you see Anna Paquin's Rogue. So it like you see Kitty's the one who's sitting there still doing it because they digitally put her in, but in the reflection, it's still Anna Paquin. So that was the way the movie was intended. It also makes sense then why they send so many Sentinels to that one location, because now they know they were able to follow them. Now they know that's where Charles, Magneto, Rogue, that's where they all are. And if we can wipe them out, then they're done, right? Like that's why they send every Sentinel they have there. So
It just makes more story sense.
Yeah,
And
it makes it. I understand if they're cutting things out, like that's an easy enough scene to cut out, and just like you're just basically replacing Anna Paquin in that one scene at the end. I understand why they did it, but I think it is a better viewing experience to view it with that scene.
Yeah.
And it's another cool action scene. You get Iceman and Magneto using their powers, against Sentinels in tunnels. It's cool.
and a small emotional beat with Rogue telling Kitty like Iceman didn't make it back. So
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I enjoyed it here on this watch, and just contextually just fit better. So all right, and then let's just talk about the final battle and like the timeline being reset basically. So I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on this battle of like Magneto's trying to assassinate Nixon and Mystique is trying to assassinate Trask, and just like it turns into this whole thing, and Xavier.
Such a cluster.
Yeah.
Smart on them too to have it at the White House, but have Magneto like use the stadium to surround it so that
Yes.
they don't have to.
Block.
So it's like it's contained. So smart on them in terms of planning out sets and things. It's so good to watch, even though like the good guys are gonna win. Like we know they're gonna win. We know it's gonna be a happy ending, but like you're watching it, and as future timeline, the X-Men are fallen, they're going down, and you just still see like they're still having the standoff in the and like they need to fix this. They need to convince her not to do it. They need to convince the people watching on all these cameras that there are good mutants so that they don't do the Sentinel program. Like we need this to happen. And you're like, it's gotta happen. It's gotta happen. Like even in the back of your mind, you know it's gonna happen. Like it's gotta happen. It's gotta happen. And it's like fall. It's so good. It's so good. And we get all the power scenes again. We get different death scenes this time, right? So like last time, what I think he choked Sunspot. This time they like cut off his arm, right? Then they like cut him in. Like last time,
Colossus's head gets crushed like a tin can, and here he gets
crushed, and this time he gets ripped in half, right? Like, so like you get all that again, and that's why. So Storm has some good moments in terms of like she's up there and she's taking him out, right? Like, and Blink opens the portal and Bishop's taking him out, and then they turn around for a second and the Sentinels come up from behind and get them both, and it's like, oh.
Yeah. Sticking with the positives, because like I said, like there are things I did enjoy about this movie. The final battle, what I liked about the final battle was, like Kevin said, just the use of the power, seeing things going off. It was kind of cool. Just it was ultimately one of those things of it's not going well. It's the losing fight, but the best thing you're like just taking away from it is like, all right, just have them go down fighting. So seeing them sometimes just get their licks in, getting a couple fights in, and ultimately this just whole movie is the same. What it does really well is just reminding you it's a race against time. Like they're not meant to. If they could beat the Sentinels, they wouldn't be doing the Kitty Pryde strat. So like, it's just ultimately just a race against the clock, and I think that's what this movie does really well, is just reminding you that it don't matter how cool the powers are going or how flashy it is. It's nice to see at the end of the day, they're not winning this. That's the whole point of it.
Right.
And so I think
it's hold them off. It's not survive. It's hold them off as long as you can.
Yeah. Ultimately, because the real victory has to come in the past, and I think sometimes the little shots of the duality of what's happening in the present or the future. I'm gonna just say the future versus what's going on with the past.
Yes.
The duality of that is pretty cool. They do a really good job cutting between scenes and stuff, shots like that. Very well done.
I will say, I do know Will's probably like, I'm biting his tongue. I know they mess up Bishop's power. They mess up Bishop's power because he doesn't power a gun.
Yeah, no, it's not even that. He actually in some ways does, but like the thing with Bishop, what I did enjoy was I like the aspect of he does have a weakness of being overloaded. So it's like when they do defeat him in ways, it's ways that I could see the Sentinels like adapting to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're very consistent with certain things, or some of the things I don't think is poorly done with there. But like with Bishop, it was like if there was any way to beat Bishop, like they do a good job at showing it's just you just overwhelm what his power is, and ultimately the way it looked out too, it was kind of like the way I see it. Like I said, it's them just taking out as many as they can. They know they're going down, and it just ended up with Bishop's like, well, if I'm gonna go, I'm taking as many as I can, and you just see him. He just blows himself up essentially. So it's just like, cool. Keep adding that layer and environment of dread, and just ever closer to that defeat.
Yeah.
Yep. Cam, any thoughts on the final battle and the timeline resetting?
It's just sandwiching a good thing with a good thing. You know, you start strong, you end strong. Loved the final battle just as much as I liked the first one. Kevin wrapped it up so nice. I like that it wasn't just a copycat from the beginning. Like it could have just they could have easily reused the footage, and people probably wouldn't complain about it. But they took the extra step to make new deaths, unique ways to kill these mutants. You know, which is
off screen more of them too. Off screen a lot more too.
Yeah, and you see like the one makes like Lady Deathstrike claws too. Like so you get it like so if you're paying attention, you see a couple of those things too.
Yeah, you get references to people who couldn't appear because in this timeline they would already be dead and their powers already taken by the Sentinels that are completely sharing knowledge. It's just like I love the Sentinels as a threat to the X-Men, and I love when you get these post-apocalyptic fights with them. Like you're already at this point, and the only thing you can do is go back because there's just not enough of you anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of like I know we'll probably eventually do that X-Men 97 show. But like I can't wait to see where that goes because they're a point right now. And you know,
I almost would have liked the X-Men movies to stop after this one. Like there are things about Apocalypse that I like. Dark Phoenix is not watchable. But like not only because those movies didn't turn out well, but because this was such a good ending to all of the stories in both timelines that were being told, and they were wrapped up enough, right? Like it's still a little messy. It's still a little like what's going on here? But it's done in such a way that you're like, I don't even care because I got the ending I wanted, right? Like as we leave the characters in the past, like Wolverine is now off the board, so he's not on the team, right? He gets taken. Mystique is off on her own. Magneto's not staying with Charles. Charles is reopening the school, right? Like, so we're getting that setup that we know is going to happen in the future because we see Cyclops, Jean, Storm, Beast. We see them all at the school in the future timeline. So, like, we get the wrap up to them. We get the characters that like. I can't even tell you how frustrating it was to be alive for all of those years between X-Men 3 and when this came out to get Jean and Cyclops back was so satisfying. Like I didn't need a movie of the young version of them because it was just so satisfying to have those characters back at all. So
it was good. It was good and smart of them to end with the old characters that we knew from the old trilogy, because essentially it was just like that's a good way, because ultimately that was what their future was leading to. So seeing those same actors, seeing those characters in the forms that we remember them from, and then ending on it was a good way to be like, here's the as happy as an ending you're gonna get for these X-Men.
And Rogue didn't take the cure in this future timeline.
Yes, that too.
So like all of the things that we hated about X3, and like again, I can't tell you how frustrating it was to like live through all those years and have wanted this ending and then to get it.
Yes.
So like
it works.
It could have ended there. It could have ended there, and I could have never had another one until Marvel bought them, and I would have been satisfied because
I'm good with Logan and the Deadpools can stay, but like
but now, even if Apocalypse had turned out great, right? Like even if Apocalypse had turned out like exactly the way they wanted and it worked, I still wouldn't have needed that movie because like this just wrapped everything up so nicely for me.
And you rarely get like kind of like a retcon that fixes things that they kind of messed up. You didn't think when you watch X-Men 3 that they're going to go into the future and fix that. And getting James Marsden to come back as Cyclops is so huge. Oh my gosh. I know I wasn't here for the X3 podcast, but I would have been devastated talking about that scene again.
Yeah, I was just also excited to see more Kelsey Grammer as Beast, like get him just walking by. Like
it's also funny that Kelsey Grammer's Beast and then Cyclops and Jean, who are like, they're just there for those cameos, right? It's like, what do they shoot for? 30 minutes? Like, they get more lines than than like Colossus, Sunspot, Warpath, Blink.
Storm doesn't get any lines. It's like,
Right.
yeah,
So that's amusing to me. But
Yeah.
I agree. Do we want to just touch on the cons before I hit like, so there are post credits and then, but let's
what cons? There are none.
I got cons, or at least these are personal cons, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately, and this was just came on rewatching it, and like after like the initial hype of it came out, I think what some of the cons are with this movie is I think sometimes they get very, for a lack of a better word, I think sometimes the writing just gets a little dull in some spots of the scene. I think also just as like in terms of like it's one of those things. There are parts of the movie I feel like when you like think about it too much, it starts getting a little confusing. Because like for a prime example, in the opening scene, one of the things where I was saying where I think the con, or like where it gets a little funky for me is just like you see when the Sunspot's fighting the one Sentinel, he turns into Iceman's powers and he beats Sunspot. And then you see in return the Sentinel copying Sunspot's powers to beat Bobby. But it's like the weirdest rock, paper, scissors because it's just like you're just seeing Ice beat Sunspot already. Why is Bobby struggling with the same Sentinel if one Sentinel is using the ice powers to get through fire? Why is this the counter? Like, and it was like one of those things where it's like, it was so, like, I didn't think about it at first because I was just like, oh, like I was wrapped up in it. But then like rewatching, I was just like, why is Iceman dying to this? Like, why is this? Like, it, like that, okay, weird, whatever, move on. I think also some weird cons too. Also just Jennifer Lawrence, like Cam hit it. Like Jennifer Lawrence plays Jennifer Lawrence. You see a lot of times, like when I think where she was doing her best was just action scenes or just scenes where she was just quick little line dialogues. But then like when you get her like really kind of talking or like, you know, like you're having more like slower pace of it, you're just like the plot line with Mystique is just like, okay, we get you're like the focal point, but oh my goodness, like please, can we just stuff with Beast. Literally, they turned him into the Wolfman, and again, they don't really explain like why is he able now to shift. Literally, we had like in first class where it showed like it had the reverse effect. Like this was what he was dealing with.
Yeah, I didn't.
They for the good points in it, they're just like they do some weird switches up on the like how characters use their powers or like why certain things work. Go ahead, little hand.
I feel like, and I feel like this is very weak, but I feel like the reason that they had him able to go back and forth was only because we had that like little like background scene of Dr. Hank McCoy in human form on the news in X2, right? So like, I kind of think that they were just like, oh yeah, how could he be the Blue Beast already and be the Blue Beast then, but then be human? So I think they were like, well, we already have this magic drug that makes Charles walk, so maybe he can just also turn Beast into human again. I don't know, like
but then he shifts, like because they did a storyline. I know the only thing that I could think of something similar was like in X. I know this is like before it, but like you have X-Men Evolution where when they first introduced Beast, he was in human form, but he was taking a serum. But it was one of those things when he shifted, it was against his will. Here we see it where he's just literally like you knocked him down on the ground a bit. He gets a little pissed off, and then he's just.
Let's also a little bit Nicholas Holt's acting ability because I think it's supposed to be like when he loses control, right? Like because he says something about how he just takes enough to like keep himself in his human form. So I think it's supposed to be that like because he doesn't take a lot, when you like get him emotionally worked up, it's almost like a Hulk thing where it just comes out and he can't control it. I think that's what they were going for, and I think Nicholas Holt is just like, oh no.
But then here's where I'm gonna like say that it's even worse. You just killed off any Hank McCoy character arc. What's his character? Hank is what we see in X-Men 3. He's this wise character who's been fighting for mutant kind. He's somewhat of a caregiver for Charles. He's just his lapdog. Literally in this movie, they use him as a lapdog because you can't even. I don't even say like he's like Charles' protector because apparently the way they presented it,
and that's the thing.
Doesn't Charles literally tell him to sit down, like lay off?
Because Kelsey Grammer's Beast would never
Yeah.
would never do that.
But that's an older. But that's the thing, though. It's an older beast. There's and this is where my bigger issue with like time travel movies go, and why I praise the young Charles and young Magneto is I could believe those two characters grew up to be the older version.
Yes.
You can't convince me in any shape or form that this Hank McCoy became the older McCoy that we see in X-Men 3.
I personally think Nicholas Hoult just he wanted to be out of makeup for some of the movies, so they just gave him the serum to make that happen.
It's like any actor who has to play a character with a mask on. Tom Holland has to take his Spider-Man mask off because he's being paid to do so. Like, it's in the contract that you need FaceTime. So it kind of sucks for comic characters that should be in character the whole time, but they kind of have to like.
Right.
Then I would much rather than if that was the case, then don't have him don't shoot him in scenes until you want him in those moments. Because especially with how they use Beast, you could have just had him as a pop-in character. That would have been fine. But then the character development that I would have loved to see is this is a Hank McCoy at this point that's supposed to be fighting for mutant kind. He showed no signs of that. He showed no signs of him staying up with studying. He showed no signs of like actually trying to help. Like he helped Charles just feed his drug addiction. There was no Charles's character development was literally a lapdog doing what he was told. And and there's even in X-Men First Class, he still was showing genius. He was saying, I built this. I did this. He was showing that he would go against the grain because he was building a cure for himself.
Yeah.
And then also, go ahead.
Looking at his age in this movie, right? Like where he is in the story is he's moved into the X Mansion to take care of Professor Xavier. I'm sure he's still studying and trying to take care. Like, without Professor X, who's doing all of the work? It's probably him. And he's not as successful because he doesn't have that kind of power. But I'm sure this is like a huge development for him because eventually you get to that. You know, it would probably be many years from now, but I wouldn't say he's doing nothing.
But I would also say he as an actor too was like a hot young up and coming actor. So they probably also thought, oh yeah, we should also have this like hot young guy out of the makeup sometimes. Yeah. And like, but they just in general, I mean, you're right. They put a lot of effort into writing Mystique's character, into writing Charles' character, into writing Magneto's character. Like those three obviously get the most to do.
Fine with that. I'm not fine about that.
Wolverine gets some fun stuff to do, but like they just obviously Quicksilver gets the cool scene, but they just don't put a lot of effort into Beast's character. But like it's still like he's mostly plot device the character. Like he's the exposition dump. So like it's fine because that's how I find out what's going on. And what's going on is this really cool stuff with the other characters. So
yeah. I think the reason why of all characters with Beast that I'm more upset about that is because he is a core X-Men character. He is an OG X-Men character.
He's one of the first. Yep.
He's one of the first. I believe and the way, like, because with him being actually at this point a consistent character we see in this new timeline, like the fact that like they are not taking steps to try to just build up something. I'm not saying he's got to be the go-to like wise guy right now, but he legit was used as a lapdog, and that to me that's such a big con because we're not talking about just some random side character. We're talking about Beast, Hank McCoy, a core X-Men character who's literally hit from the very beginning. His whole premise is, even despite him losing control, he's always been very intelligent. He's been a soft-hearted giant. He doesn't like just raging out. So I don't like the whole, while it's fun seeing him chase after Eric when he's hurting like Mystique, it doesn't seem believable that Hank's first option right off rip is drowning Eric. Right. He would probably like throw him around, but he goes straight to drowning. Like that's not Beast. That's not Hank.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's where the con is. It's like you do such a great job with some characters, but then all of a sudden, like for another one, you're just like literally, all right, he's Wolfman. Cool. Yeah. He's sick on him. And then also, I think some other real quick cons I have with the movie, it's just, I think, like I said, it just kind of gets it gets very weird with like this is a movie where I think the action scenes are actually probably the weakest points of the movie. It's in some sense, I think it's better as like a doomsday clock. It's a countdown. The real stuff, because like I said, here's the thing. It's like you see some cool powers. I'm not doubting that. Like the fights are cool, but I'm saying like at the end of the day, what kept me engaged with the whole movie is the plot itself, the fact that they're on a countdown, and at the end of the day, because no matter what fighting they do in the future, as cool as it is, all it is just you're just seeing the results of the time ticking down, and it's just like I think I think certain fights were just kind of just a little messy, personally. But like again, it's a nitpick. They're still like cool in like the grand scheme of things. But I think certain fights were just like again, like Beast fighting Magneto, like trying to ground him.
I think a lot of the stuff with like obviously the opening battle and the final battle are both like huge.
I'm fine with that. That is,
and then there's like the minor scenes in the middle, right? Like there's the Wolverine versus the gangsters who come in and shoot him, like minor one. There's like Mystique getting the mutants from Vietnam, like breaking them out.
Minor movie. For some reason, I thought that was Apocalypse for the longest time because like I was sitting here, I was like, did that happen? Because I was just, like when, and then like when I rewatched it, I was just like, I still didn't believe it. I was like, I really thought this was Apocalypse that she like got him from Vietnam.
Yeah. So there's some like other ones in there, and then so the Beast with Magneto one in particular, I think again, like I just think that they use Beast as like they just used him. They didn't actually write his character. So like part of that is that you're getting the shaky cam footage in the 70s of like this big blue beast like drowning this so it's more about like it's more about creating that image to show on the news than it is about either of those characters, especially Beast. You know, like so I think that's what that's about. And that I mean, all the stuff that's happening at the White House is like the minor ones are like meh, but like they're not.
I misspoke like when I said the fight scenes like were like they were good. I think the stronger points is in just the narrative itself. There's good fights. I'm staying corrected on that. There are good fight scenes, and then even like with the Beast one, like you said, the narrative behind it is more impactful than the fight itself.
Yes,
I just think a lot of it just has to do. It just seems it was such a. I think
imagine being in the 70s. You're watching Technicolor TV for the first time, and you're seeing a person changing forms. You're seeing somebody drag a woman by the bullet in her leg. You're seeing a blue thing try to drown that guy, and then for some reason the fountain like reaches down and picks him up. Like imagine watching that all on you know Blair Witch Project camera. Like
I think that impact like if they want to have Beast for like the like shock and awe of like you know horrifying like visual mutants, that would have been good. To me, I think a better replacement for that fight would have been if you would have had Wolverine going after like Magneto. I'm not saying like obviously Wolverine in this situation. I think that's an unappreciated storyline, which is a really good thing. I love them adding Wolverine's trauma kind of like back into this. And I think it's actually kind of dope seeing him like in the sense of like seeing like how this really sent this man into a fucking panic attack. Like Wolverine of all people had a panic attack, and that's insane something.
And notice that it's Stryker from X2. They don't care about showing the Origins Wolverine one because he was not as good.
Right.
So, all right. Well, I think let's move on. I'm going to do the post-credit scenes, then we'll move on to our rankings and our top 5 characters for the movie. So post-credit scenes, one is Trask in jail, and I thought there was more to it, but it just ends after showing him in jail. So I'm like, okay. Sure. But the bigger one is the tease of Apocalypse and Summoner, and obviously it's not Oscar Isaac, I don't think, but it's just some random actor.
Well, it's a younger version too, because he's supposed to be the oldest human.
Yeah.
So they showed
I forgot how they set up that post scene with Apocalypse. Did they state that it was farther back in the past?
don't
They
think.
do they say it, or do they just show the pyramids as being, and like that
They
it's
show
like
it being built, and then they
Yeah,
And you
have
see
I
the
know they
four
showed it, but I
horsemen in
didn't
the
know like
and
in
background.
Sovereigner.
you
That's
see
yeah,
and you
and
hear the
some
chant of his name. Yeah.
yeah. Which
It was very
I
obvious who it was.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Any
no, it was
yes.
it was 100% obvious. The only reason why I asked that question was because like I'm just like trying to like recall, and for some reason I was like, I think they just kind of just jumped to it, and like once you know who it is, you know you're like, oh, this is obvious, and like you said, the pyramids, you're like, oh, this is way farther back.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very difficult to tease a bigger threat than what just happened. Like basically the end of the world, Sentinels killing all the X-Men, and you're like,
Right.
well, how do we top that? You either have to bring in Mr. Sinister or Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And
So,
yeah, like that was honestly like you had no other choice. I see this is where like I really got giddy because like I love Apocalypse. Like so it's like I got super giddy and seeing like that introduction, especially seeing a young Apocalypse. And so it was just like, oh, I'm like, oh sweet, this is obviously the next direction we're going. And so I dug that posting. Like it was really dope, and it was just kind of like well, then it also just kind of raised a little bit of questions because I was like, if we're getting another one, like what's the casting we're gonna get? Like who's playing who in this then?
Yeah.
Because little do we know, like, well, I mean, ultimately though, then I we're on a whole like I know they established the new timeline because we got Charles and Magneto like for the Apocalypse movie.
Mhm.
But the way this movie ended, though, you see the old cast. So it kind of just real quick because it just dawned on me. So did the whole stuff with Apocalypse happen before they got to the age at the end of X-Men: Days of Futures Past?
It's confusing. The Fox X-Men universe doesn't make any sense.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Probably.
because no wait.
I don't think it's
in
meant to
X-Men
make sense.
Wait, no, because in
So-
the X-Men Apocalypse, don't they get Wolverine out? Oh my god, I'm so confused. I hate time
so
travel.
they yeah so
I hate time travel.
they do break him out.
Yeah, because he
So
attacks all
so
the guards
basically the
inside
only
and-
change would be that like Jean, Scott, and Nightcrawler would have recognized Wolverine.
Right, and they wouldn't have been.
Um,
Well, they're younger too. They're much younger.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
They might have recognized him when he eventually gets to the X-Mansion
Right.
with Rogue.
I know that was a little like side note, but I just was trying to think about it because I was like, we're carrying over things, and I was like, ugh.
All right.
Carry the
Fucking-
one. Hold on.
No, this is why I will always say time travel is such a bullshit thing, and I hate it.
I do appreciate that this, though it's a time travel, it's the idea of like there's one timeline. So like
Yes.
like
Like
once,
I think they do really good with that, and I
Yeah.
like again big pro to that. They don't go really too much into like I mean they mention like how Kitty does it, but like at the same time I think I will give the movie big props of they don't make you think about it too much. They're just like
Yeah.
I can do this.
she's the one in the comics who went back in time, but also kind of it vaguely makes sense that like she can phase through walls, so she can phase your mind through time, and we just like don't think
And
about
you're
it
not
too
really like you're like your body's not going back in time. Your
We don't-
conscious is going
we
back
don't
in time.
we don't think about it. It's fine.
Yeah, but
That's-
that's I will also say like and then like tongue in cheek wise, a slight con is like sometimes it's like when you do start thinking about certain things of the movie, you're just like, what? Why?
Just
Let's not think about it.
don't think about it. Why
Let's-
think about it? Why think about it and ruin the wonderful experience out of
There
it?
are good things to think about. There are good points to think about, like the dialogue between Charles and themselves, Charles and like you know like or Logan and young Charles. Like I think that's really cool. And the big props to that, using Logan as the Charles figure, and also kind of really respect to these guys. Like if you really think about it, this is the most sidelined Wolverine has been
Yeah.
in an X-Men movie.
Well,
Yeah.
With this, let's head into our rankings because I think it's time to hit those so we aren't here ranting all night.
True.
As much as I love your guys' rants.
I rant.
So the rankings as they stand at the moment for the movies, it is First Class number 1, X2 number 2, X-Men 1 at 3, and Last Stand at 4. And then we did put Origins Wolverine in last. We have if we were to put the Wolverine on here, I still need to like finish it.
No. putting X-Men Origins on there is just for funsies. I mean, we already said I would say this is number one. This is my favorite movie. It's always going to be my favorite X-Men movie. You can fight amongst yourselves about it. It will never not be my personal favorite, and I will never say that it's not the best. So
Yeah, I prefer First Class and X2 over this slightly. I do like Days of Future Past. It would probably be my number 3 out of all of them. Like, it's definitely above the first X-Men. It's definitely above Last Stand. So like it's I enjoyed it enough, but you know, we had cons for it. And time travel is BS, as Will said. It's weird, and like there's definite things that are wrong with the movie, but there's also so much good for it too. So I will have it as number 3, but we'll take the average and we'll see what Cam and Will think. So
I got it as number 3 for me. I got it just underneath X-Men 2. I think, and it's really close, honestly. For as much as I was talking about the cons, like I said, overall there's more good than cons. So it's still, I think, the 3rd best X-Men movie.
Cameron,
Cam,
you're on mute. Do you remember that? Don't forget to unmute before you speak.
Oh no. And was sitting there thinking, he's
the
like,
only movie that can contest Days of Future Past is First Class. But I wasn't here for the First Class podcast.
Well, First Class
So-
is number 1 as of right now.
yes.
Mhm.
I feel like it's going to average out at number 2 after I say this is number 1.
Yeah, it would average out as number 2 at that point. I mean, it would.
But
yeah.
I'm fine with either one. Like, since I wasn't here for those, I don't want to like totally influence the vote. But it's my favorite X-Men film.
Yeah.
It's my 2nd favorite X-Men film, actually, next to X-Men Origins Wolverine, which is the best X-Men movie.
You shut up.
No, cut off.
Wait, let him cook. Let him
It's
cook.
not even close. It's a landslide.
Let him cook.
It's like a 7-0 final vote. I'm telling you. X-Men Origins, my favorite movie.
Not even X-Men
I
Origins.
must really love to
Wolverine
see
Origins.
Claus.
I think my least favorite is Logan.
All right, now we're gonna play.
Cam?
Now get out of the kitchen. I said let him cook, but he's done. He burnt the damn thing down. Oh no.
I think I just need to rewatch Logan because I got so
Well-
bored the first time that I think I tuned out.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so are you putting this at number 2, or are you sliding into number 1? 1. All right. So, and to avoid another tie, we're just gonna take the average for this week, and
I would-
so it'll be number 2.
I would say putting it above X2 also makes sense because I have them as Days of Future Past, X2, First Class. So like it being
Yeah,
above
no,
X2,
I'd put it over X2 too. Yeah, that's actually probably fair. I mean, yeah, no, actually, yep. After further thought, put it over X-Men 2. I definitely have it at number 2. It'd be more of a stretch to make it number 1 for me. Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well,
but
yeah,
it's still
gonna
real
go number
good.
2.
It is good. It's so damn good.
I love
I-
it.
Yeah. All right.
I
Well,
can't wait to argue for the next one. It's gonna
It
be
is-
number 1.
it is gonna be number 2. So that works. So it is First Class, Days of Future Past, X2, X-Men 1, Last Stand, and that's out of what we have ranked so far. And I mean, at the end, if we want to throw Origins and the Wolverine on later, but we can. But
How do you guys not like Origins? That is crazy to me.
the movie that botched Deadpool.
Okay,
Cameron,
everyone fucking
Cameron,
says that, but
Cameron.
like, come on.
Cameron,
And
I
the
love you
CGI
dearly.
claws.
I love you so much. You got to stop.
Are we not allowed to have our own personal opinions and
No, we
joys in
are.
life?
We
Enjoy what
I-
you want. Man.
enjoy what you want.
I just love a good kind of, it seems like a heist story. You're collecting a crew. I love that shit. I eat that up.
I will say
Yeah.
the best part about Origins Wolverine is Liev Schreiber's Sabretooth. I've said that repeatedly. I will stand by that, especially after rewatching it.
You didn't think it was that version of Cyclops?
Oh yeah, and the really bad version of Cyclops.
You didn't
Dog,
think it was
Will
that,
I
you didn't think it was Gambit?
Will I Am carried that movie.
Yeah,
Will
Will I
I
Am in that
Am.
movie was awesome.
Yeah.
And you get the
He
blob.
carried.
The Blob. That's true. That's true.
Come on, there was definitely benefits. You get White Queen in it, don't you?
Gambit.
You
Gambit,
do.
you get
She's
Taylor
in prison.
Kitsch's
She is
Gambit.
Silver Fox's sister, and that's why Silver Fox agrees to help blackmail or trick Wolverine. Yes. Anyways, we're not talking about that movie.
Well, we should be because it's number one, baby.
Well,
um,
top 5 characters now. I mean Wolverine, again, there's some great stuff. Wolverine has to be number 1.
In this
What I
movie
love-
specifically?
Well, I mean, maybe not number 1 for this specific movie, but he's in the top
Ooh.
5, I guess.
Oh,
And-
I mean, yeah.
But like I just like the fact that like this is also like we saw it in Origins Wolverine, but Hugh Jackman got so big from like this point forward. Like dude, when he wakes up in the new timeline, those gangsters come in. I don't know how you like don't you look at Hugh Jackman, like how built this dude is compared to you, and you're just not like running away in terror because
You
that
got guns. I don't care how big a dude is. If you think he's a normal man and I got 5 guns pointed at you, I'm using the gun. It's a great
fair enough.
equalizer.
Like, a guy that big is right there, I'm gonna get scared and intimidated. Like,
That's why you
Right.
got the gun. It equals it out. And then all of a sudden he heals and you're just like, okay, cool. This is useless. Yoink.
I did like also the reference to get it. He has the bone claws at that time, which is
Mhm.
Origins Wolverine being referenced
but
there.
so I would also say, like, we're talking about in the franchise overall, right? So like in these movies, obviously Charles, Magneto, and Mystique get the most.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
get the most to do.
Yeah.
Wolverine also like gets a lot to do kind of like narratively.
He's the key
right?
player.
Like,
Yeah.
So like he would obviously still be up there, right? So we can't rank every character. It's got like
Right.
we're up to like 20 something.
Yes,
Can't do it. But like when we're talking about top 5, he's definitely in the top 5.
yes.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. If anything, the way I would ramble it off real fast, because especially with the progression of how things go, Magneto 1, Charles 2, Wolverine 3, Mystique 4, and then 5.
Will I Am.
Iceman.
Iceman. I'm going for Iceman. I'm with Kevin here, honestly.
I would say Blink for this one movie because it's so cool, but I'll stick with Iceman. I'll take Iceman.
I would say Quicksilver because I think he's built more of a.
Oh, actually, yeah.
Yeah, Quicksilver.
I'm saying Quicksilver because, like, just the one movie alone. If you think about it, I know you're the Iceman stan, but I'm just saying, in his one moment of shining alone, he had a bigger impact for the story all time than Iceman did throughout all his appearances.
Iceman has been in 4 of the 5 movies we talked about. So I just think he's such a
And
consistent.
guess what? How many
Okay,
times
but did he
has
chill a
Iceman
beer in
died?
this movie or not? Did he chill
Just
a
saying.
beer?
Just saying. He's a pretty consistent character.
Yeah,
I do agree with that,
joking.
Kevin. But then I think about Evan Peters' Quicksilver and like how much of a fan favorite this guy becomes in like one scene in this movie, and it's just like, I think it's definitely between those two for this 5th spot. It's Iceman or Quicksilver. So
Flip a
But
coin.
let's put
Yeah.
Iceman there for now because Quicksilver comes back in Apocalypse.
Fine.
that's true. That and
Fine. We'll let Kevin have his moment. Sarah's not here, so he's finally gonna get his moment.
yeah.
Excuse me.
I
Sarah
get plenty
is
of moments
here.
without her.
Sorry, Sarah. Sorry, Sarah. I didn't recognize you
Hey,
without your
fuck
makeup.
you,
My
Kevin.
bad.
Wow, that
Yeah,
was so
like,
convincing.
You're old.
It's
bro.
like looking in a mirror.
You're just as old as those Legos. I'm just kidding. I'm so excited.
He's even leaned over into the camera like Sarah was half the goddamn time. So
Right. Well,
Should I
she
go
goes
sit in my
out of
car?
screen for a minute, and she comes back and she gets real close, and she says, "Fuck you, Kevin."
yeah, leaned over, just fucking.
Yeah. All right. So that is how everything goes for the rankings. Next week, we're gonna get into Logan. So Logan is definitely one of the best comic book movies ever made, in my opinion. So I'm excited to rewatch this. I think it is it's like a Western as a superhero movie.
It's very well done. I still have my like nerd fest movies ahead of it, but it is extremely good.
Yeah. Yep. So we will be doing Logan and then the 2 Deadpools, and that should take us right into Deadpool and Wolverine on time. If we somehow do have more time and we want to do Apocalypse as well, we will do that. But it just depends because as soon as Deadpool and Wolverine comes out, we're reviewing that to finish off the series. And
I already
Yeah.
have my AMC. Let's see, what time am I going? You keep talking. I'm gonna look this up real quick.
yeah, I will keep talking. So yeah, we have that, and then on our other side of our coverage on Tribe of Nerds, we are continuing our Australian Survivor coverage now. Ooh, Kevin's got that pulled up. Nice. So we will have Australian Survivor coverage. We are talking about Australian Survivor All-Stars, talking about the win of the Golden God, and many other people that came back, and why some people probably shouldn't have come back for that season. But I guess that's any returning player season of Survivor. So yeah, that's going to be exciting with Michael and Matt. And because we had Dirty Harry on last week, there's potential for more Survivor players. But we will let that be a surprise for or a tease when, that actually does happen. So any other thoughts before I close this out, guys?
All Stars is the best Australian Survivor season.
Is it? Is it really?
It is.
Best X-Men movie ever.
People give King George too much credit. He can't carry a whole season. All Stars is awesome.
Okay, you're saying, okay, that's a different discussion. But all right, well, we will see you next time on the Tribe of Nerds.
Fuck you, Sarah.
Fuck you, Sarah.
Fuck you, Sarah.